Very welcome everyone to today's webinar, which is with Dan Morgan from Farm Social. Aoife's going to be managing the webinar, so I'm just going to pass over to Aoife there now, and Aoife will introduce and then we'll get started. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Emma. So thanks everyone for joining us on another episode of the Resilience webinar series. So today, Dan Morgan will be presenting on designing resilience and food security for subsistent farmers. Dan is a service and interaction designer specialising in healthcare design, and he's the co-founder of Farm Social, a social enterprise that helps subsistence farmers in rural communities build their food security and resilience. And he is also co-creator of the Biokiln, which helps farmers boost their crop productivity. So just before I hand you over to Dan, I just want to mention that as usual, there'll be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar to allow you to ask any questions. So I'll pass you over to Dan. Thanks.
Perfect. So hi everyone. So I'm one part of Farm Social, the other part being Owen Bracken, and I guess a little bit of history about ourselves is we started as a college project that went on to enter the Engineers Without Borders Ireland, where there is no engineer competition. And we won that competition, and we were able to go out to Nepal and implement our solution for design for farmers for food security and resilience. And basically that started about 4 years ago, and I'm going to talk through a lot of our learnings that we have from Nepal, and then our case studies and kind of research work that we've done in Ireland in the last kind of year or so. So I guess, you know, what does Farm Social do? And really what we're trying to do is help farmers build resilience, and we're trying to do that through food security. And often, you know, when I start these presentations, you know, start talking about how we do it, and we do it making a biokiln, and that makes biochar. But a lot of this is quite kind of, say, unfamiliar to most people. And really I like to start with this slide and say what we do is we turn kind of crops, and particularly root vegetables, like you can see on the screen here, from this into this. And we do that through biochar. So really, you know, what the kind of the three things that we do that kind of not only help food security but also kind of help the resilience of the subsistence farmer is we increase soil moisture retention by up to 60%, and that's effectively an insurance policy. So if there is a drought, that your crops are more likely to survive. You know, we also help improve root development by up to kind of 34% with biochar. And this allows for a more kind of resilient plant, a plant that's more likely to survive, and particularly survive shocks in weather changes. And then ultimately a crop rate of 40% increase, which means that either you've kind of 40% more food on your table, 40% more food that you can sell, or you can actually spend less time producing food and use that time to be spent on kind of more of these activities that you want to be doing when you're a subsistence farmer. It's not necessarily the main activity that you're doing. It's part of what you're doing. So kind of who are we doing it for? Well, basically what we're trying to do is for rural farmers. We're looking at a range of crops from maize to root vegetables and different types of bushes and trees as well. And what we're taking is a kind of agricultural waste or organic waste, and we're converting this into biochar to help improve the food security and food quality. So you may be wondering now, that all sounds great, that they're great outputs, but how do you do it? Well, this is how we do it. That kiln in the middle, that is our solution, and that's how we turn kind of organic matter into this biochar that we then put into the ground, which has those great results. As you can see there, this is a picture out in Nepal from about 2 years ago, maybe just over a little over 2 years ago, of one of our prototype kilns out in the field. So I guess kind of backing up, that's the kiln itself, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about the process and what the kiln's made out of. But ultimately, we're making this biochar, and basically what biochar is in a nutshell is it's a carbon. It can act as a bio-fertiliser. Most people think of it as charcoal, but really it isn't charcoal. It's very light to touch. It has a glassy metallic sound and can be crushed by hands. And ultimately, it's very porous, so it kind of acts like a sponge. So if we think of it, when you introduce it into soil and just below kind of the top layer of soil or around topsoil, it allows for great aeration. It holds on to moisture, but doesn't cause the soil to get waterlogged, and it adds fantastic structure to the soil. So it basically effectively acts as kind of an espresso for the plants, so that they can grow. They have this kind of shock of energy and nutrients, and they're able to grow quickly and effectively. So how do we make biochar? Well, we've got a kind of this kiln system design where we have this outside drum. We have corrugated sheet around it, and then we have this outside drum with hole placement to allow air into it. We then have this internal drum, and basically anything that you put inside that internal drum will become biochar. And then you need to place wood or some sort of organic material that will burn around the outside of the kiln. And this will create the heat to get up to about 400 degrees and ultimately cook in an oxygen limited environment this internal chamber, which through a scientific reaction called pyrolysis takes out all the moisture and just leaves carbon ready to be turned into biochar. So as this kind of goes through here, we take kind of general organic waste that you can find, and we've tested everything from kind of rice husks to banana peels, tangerine peels, but also kind of offcuts of wood, leaves, sticks, and really kind of the rule of thumb is what you're looking for is about moisture content of kind of under 22%, which generally you can feel that by touch. So the kiln itself is made of 6 parts. We can make these in about 2 hours time. The whole weight of the system is about 10 kilos. And I'll touch on the next few slides and photos of like a lot of this information, why we decided on these number of parts, weights, fabrication times, how it actually works. So the burn time takes around 2 hours, and we get up to a kind of consistent temperature throughout that 2 hours of 400 or 500 degrees. And one burn typically produces anywhere between 2 and 5 meters of biochar coverage. It's a self-maintaining system. It has no kind of smoke. It kind of burns the smoke itself, and there's no sharp edges. So really, if you're a subsistence farmer, and you have these types of products, you want to be able to build these on site or near where you live. You want to have a system that is that you can fill, that you can use easy. It's easy to maintain, that you don't have to be watching over. So these are all kind of important considerations. And then the weight and the number of parts means that you can kind of replace and maintain parts, but also that you can kind of carry it and move it from spot to spot. So kind of going a little bit backwards, when we kind of started this project, one of the things that really encouraged us was that the World Bank had done this study on biochar systems and for small landholders in developing countries, and they had identified this as like a real viable and valuable asset. And we thought, brilliant, but why isn't it out there? So it really, through kind of research and kind of doing different testing and prototype, we realized that yes, biochar has been around for thousands of years, but particularly for rural farmers, and particularly in, say, mountainous or rural regions, a lot of the systems are not easy to use. You don't know if you're getting good input or good output out of it. It's not obvious how to use it, and it's also difficult to kind of maintain this system. And they're usually quite inefficient and slightly costly, because you have to put in so much organic material and you get so little biochar out of it. So it was great kind of to see that the World Bank had done a study on this, and we really kind of took this research and ran with it. For our case study out in Nepal, really kind of the things that we wanted to kind of understand out there was, were materials readily available? Could you get access to them in kind of some of the most remote areas of the country? Could they be fabricated on site in villages or in rural communities? How easy was this to do? We gave demonstrations to see, was this something that people were potentially interested in? Did kind of get that kind of community buy-in and try and identify some kind of champions from it? The big learning for us was the interaction. So how did people actually interact with it? Were they going to use it? Was this a solution for kind of the future? And then the actual education piece around kind of soil health, ultimately making better crops, and ultimately how that affects human health, and then actually getting the crops out of it and into the soil, and seeing, is this actually improving food security? So we answered a lot of these questions, and I'll go through kind of a couple of the photos now, just to talk about them more. So one of like the big learnings we designed the kiln to be small, that you could wear it on your back, that it could be made kind of in kind of remote regions. And this is a photo of us going up to a region called Biochar, and as you can see, this is supposedly a main road that buses go up and down. So getting supplies and materials in and out, particularly things like fertilizers and pesticides, not viable when you're going up into the Himalayas or quite mountainous regions. And generally, if you have a small plot of land around, an acre can be split amongst different kind of levels of terraces. So being able to move a kiln or move kind of fertilizer around is a challenging prospect. So as you can see here on the left, this is one of the Sherpas carrying a kiln up, and then also it could fit kind of quite comfortably. A couple of kilns could fit quite comfortably on the top of a roof of a car. The other thing to kind of notice was actually like trying to identify kind of community champions or kind of people that would be traveling around from different parts of Nepal, and see what were kind of the opportunities, and kind of spread the knowledge of the kiln, and what potential uses or modifications might be needed in different regions. So it was really important to kind of get it integrated with a number of different stakeholders. Just to kind of show you this photo here, really I think the takeaway here is kind of the soil quality. Because a lot of there's kind of quite steep slopes, and you've got different kind of soil qualities of quite clayed, quite silty sand in this region. Soil health is actually quite poor. So being able to introduce something not into the soil health that, yes, had an immediate effect on the crops and kind of that short-term yield of crop output, but really what we were looking at is when you put biochar into the ground, you can have effects on the soil up to 7 years. It's providing structure, it's providing an environment for microorganisms to best utilize the soil, and it stops the soil from being leached with water from minerals due to like heavy rainfall or rain kind of coming down on the terraces. And then this kind of is another example of kind of, I guess, a small kind of holding of land here, and kind of the tools and the methods that are all used. So generally everything's done by hand. Everything is kind of quite rudimentary. So designing a kiln was really, really important, that it would kind of fit into this environment that could be shared between a community or potentially a couple of farmers. And that it was easy to move, easy to set up, and as you can see in this photo, like the amount of kind of like twigs or sticks or kind of like rice husks or banana peels that in this kind of photo that could be potentially used and turned into biochar. It's kind of abundant and kind of around the place. Something that we were very keen on was that you weren't kind of cutting down trees or bamboo and putting this into the kiln, that it really was kind of agricultural waste was going into this internal drum and filling it up. And then kind of our biggest assumption, our biggest worry was when we were doing this out in Ireland and then going to Nepal, was how do we make this? And particularly in areas where you have rolling blackouts and you have areas where like there isn't a consistent power supply, or you won't find an angle grinder or a welder that easily. This was kind of a concern for us, but we went to this rail maker in this rural community of Biochar, and as you can see in the background of that photo, the guy makes kind of ornate kind of rails and gates, and they were able to do everything by hand. They were able to shear the metal, cut the metal all by hand, join it, rivet it. So it was absolutely amazing to kind of be integrated in this workshop environment and kind of see the skills and kind of the innovation that the guys are able to do. And really this gave us great confidence that this could be kind of made anywhere. The drums, the corrugated sheeting, the chimney, everything can kind of be made on site if there's some metal around, and generally a craftsperson or someone that is making railings or making some sort of kind of household goods. And then like another kind of big key learning for us was, it was great designing this kiln out there, but it was how did people interact with it? What did they see the value in it? What ideas did they get about around it? And this was really this great to see that that we were getting kind of great interaction, but also that they were like putting the tea kettle on this and starting to ask questions about what else can this kiln do, how can it provide heating, how can we cook with it, what other uses are there for it. So that's kind of been our kind of second phase and third phase of experimentation, is seeing what additional uses can we use this kiln for, because it's getting up to 500 degrees for 2 hours. So like what was really, really important in this kind of instance was, you're talking about making a soil amenity biochar. You're putting it into the ground, but you don't see the results for it for like 6-7 months. So we needed to kind of show people that there is some sort of value to it in the short term, that you can get use out of it and utility out of it in the short term. So a lot of that around cooking is more perception based, rather than say the core or secondary function, rather than say the core functionality of the design. And then I think the third one was just getting learning was just getting people involved and getting people excited about it, and really kind of seeing how these kind of community structures work in rural communities, and who are more likely to be involved in this. And generally we identify that women are more likely to be using this system and involved in this. And then Owen did a phenomenal amount of education, and we realized it's great just dropping a kiln in there, but really it's all about the knowledge and trying to, the mental model of the guys were already using potash, from their cooking. They were already putting on their soil, and we were just kind of adding on an extra couple of steps onto that and explaining the best ways of actually how to get the planting, and some of those additional uses of using it as kind of a filter to reduce smell, and so on, with animals, or as an animal feed as well. So kind of really what we've learned from this project really is, soil health is at kind of the core of food production. And really kind of, if you think of it, like, if you can get the soil health and you can create healthy crops, you're kind of also affecting kind of human health, and also kind of the outputs and of these rural farmers who are already extremely resilient, but we're just trying to add another kind of tool in their toolbox, so that, if there is a drought, if there is kind of a shock to the soil system, that their crops have the best chance to survive. So kind of recently, just to kind of pivot a little bit more recently, we're doing a lot more research, and this is some biochar underneath a microscope, and you can see here the kind of the structure of it, and the basically how it acts as kind of this kind of porous substance, like a sponge. So I think with a lot of it, when we show biochar, they think of charcoal, but really this is the structure of it under a microscope, and we're doing a lot of scientific testing at the moment, because to prove that it is safe, and it's okay to be in the soil for long periods of time, and in the food system. And really kind of our goal going forward is that we want to get this out into as many people's hands as possible. We obviously can't be there. So our goal kind of in the next kind of 2-3 years is to try and get these kilns in up to 500 rural communities. And the way that we've done this is we've put all our plans online, we've put all the instructions online, and we're really trying to partner with people to see if they can run use cases, case studies, and trials of this project in other areas beyond Nepal, and see does this technology apply to areas, other rural areas around the world, and kind of those unique interaction points and mental models that users have. And really, all this project wouldn't have been possible without, of course, Engineers Without Borders, TUD, from sponsoring it, the Irish Nepal Society for providing all that excellent user research, and then Concern and Irish Aid being able to Sherpa us around Nepal. So really, I guess if anyone wants to talk to us afterwards, we can share our emails around, but we're really keen on kind of partnering with people, and we've partnered with a number of community centres and groweries around Ireland, but we're looking to partner more outside of Ireland, and build up kind of the knowledge around biochar. So if you want to find out more information about us, we're on the Engineers Without Borders site, and you can find kind of our videos and some of our plans and the templates out there as well, but you can also email us for that. So I think that's everything. I blitzed through that, guys. I don't know if we have any questions at this time.
Thanks, Dan. That was really interesting. We do have one question already from Chris. I'm just going to unmute you, Chris, so you can ask the question. So Chris, you should be able to unmute yourself there and ask your question.
That should be it now. Hi there. Just wondering, whenever you've been looking at the biochars here, have you been monitoring the heavy metal concentrations within the total amount and seeing how that would play out over the long term?
Yeah, so again, my background's in design, so it wouldn't be our forte, but I think WB has been fantastic in supporting us in trying to figure out those kind of key questions around carcinogenics and also around kind of heavy metal contents and everything like that. From the initial work that's been done and testing, it isn't a concern, but that doesn't mean that more like long-term testing shouldn't be done. As far as biochar being around for kind of thousands of years, there's a lot of evidence and a lot of kind of other studies out there that support that it is a kind of a viable and safe solution.
Perfect.
I've just put up on screen as well some of our kind of like our key kind of like questions that we normally get asked or people generally ask us about biochar, and also kind of our pilot as well. You know, why did we choose Nepal, and like thinking about like that, you know, nearly 86% of the population is living rurally and 68% of the population are subsistence farming, and you know, your average farm size can be quite big, but also can be quite small. And there's also a lot of mouths to feed as well, and kind of livestock as well. So yeah, I've kind of thrown up some of those questions we normally get asked.
Does anyone else have a question to ask now?
And really, like we're really happy to have a conversation or talk offline with anyone who's interested in this type of technology or this type of application. This is something that kind of excites us. It's something that we do generally on our weekends. We both have kind of day jobs, and we're really keen to kind of see out there in the world and kind of push on. So if there is anyone interested or wants to build a kiln or anything, we're more than happy to support them, be it in an Irish context or a different context.
So Dan, we have a question now from Pat. So Pat, you should be able to ask your question there.
Hi, sorry, Pat King here. I was just wondering, what are the waste outputs there? Are we increasing the carbon output, or how does that work?
Yeah, so one of the things, the testing that we really were keen on was to get emissions testing, and basically because when you go above, so it's 500 degrees on the internal barrel temperature, but you're getting up to kind of 900 degrees kind of externally, and what you're doing is with the airflow, because it's a top burn, is you're burning off the sign gas. So ultimately a lot of water vapor is being released, so you're trying to get a near smokeless burn from that perspective. We've also kind of optimized the heat retention and airflow so that you're trying to use as little wood stock to get up to that kind of initial 400 to 500 degrees to create the reaction to create biochar, and use as little wood stock as possible. And then of course on the internal stuff, we're really trying to promote the use of agricultural waste, so things that don't necessarily compost the best. So for example, like sticks, bark, rice husks, things like that, and using that rather than cutting down trees or putting in kind of wood stock that would be used for fuel or so on. So they're kind of some of our considerations. It's definitely big. And as far as kind of getting, say, a bag of fertilizer, you know, from down, be it through Kathmandu that's come through India or come through China, and then getting it up the mountain, it's definitely more efficient and potentially, like when it comes to carbon offsets and also for the environment as well, it's a little bit better.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And we have another question from Angelique.
Hi there.
How are things?
Just a quick question there. Do you monitor the communities after you have supplied them, in the sense that they actually doing long-term what you intended this all to be done, instead of, I'm not sure if they would get strayed or stray from what it was intended for. So instead of just dropping it off and showing them, you actually just monitor and see how they use it, and then whether the soil, whether you monitor that, or you just drop it off and...
Yeah, so originally when we went out, Concern were the kind of the partner on the ground that were implementing it, and then they implemented questions into their community survey. So a lot of what they were doing was on water quality and like access to water. So they kind of tacked on a few questions there. And to be honest, that wasn't really good enough. And I think one of the big learnings from this was we were so concerned about kind of getting it up and running and kind of monitoring that initial time, that long-term development wasn't good enough. That initial plan to set it up and monitor wasn't good enough. Even from a kind of a cultural aspect, you know, Nepal relies so heavily on tourism, and their people are generally so accommodating and so nice that we were like, look, this is kind of an initial prototype, what's wrong with it? We knew that it would be successful once they start kind of owning it, hacking it, making it better, kind of adapting it to their own context, and kind of seeing kind of interesting ways of using it that we hadn't thought of. So that we were looking for all that information, and we really didn't get enough of that information. We did create like a strong link with one of the Sherpas, Depeche, who was very good at keeping us involved, like up to date and involved with that. As far as kind of like testing soil qualities, that's something that we needed to do more, and it probably comes down to like our partner level. So we're not out in the community itself, so having a very, very strong partner that is aligned to, say, food security or the conditions of soil is really, really, really important, because they actually have the skill sets, the capability and the infrastructure to be able to do those tests, while there isn't in Biochar or Polini, where the two kilns are, or the two case studies that we did, the kilns are, there wasn't that infrastructure. So getting that kind of feedback loop was very, very, very challenging. So these were all learnings that we're taking forward into like our next kind of use cases and partnerships. Is how do you see that, and how do you realize that beyond just anecdotal evidence and survey evidence? How do you actually get some kind of hard science numbers back? We know from our case studies here that we've done in Ireland that this is true with getting our soil tested and monitoring particularly the nitrogen levels and looking at the soil structure, that this holds true. So we'd love to do that more out on site, but we've been able to do that with the Rathcoffey and the Burr groweries and a growery down in Bray as well. So we've been able to kind of get the feedback loop locally, but not necessarily as strong as we wanted it externally. I hope that answered your question. It was a bit positive and negative, I guess, has been. We definitely see opportunities in the space to work and develop and improve there.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So it looks like that's all questions, unless there's any last questions. No, it looks like that's it. But as Dan said, if you want to get in touch with him for more information, I'm sure he's happy to answer any questions you might have. So that concludes this episode of the webinar, and next week's episode will be with Aileen Flanagan, who's an EWB committee member, and she also has extensive experience in sustainable development. In her daily work, she uses GIS, spatial and data analysis to help create resilient solutions for communities, and her webinar will be on building in climate resilience. So thank you again for everyone for joining us, and thanks, Dan, for the presentation. So
Thank you.
hopefully see you all next week. Thanks.